Incredible day in court in Boise, Idaho, not far from where these crimes were committed. In Moscow, Idaho, were four college students with everything in front of them, happy lives, beautiful friendships, boyfriends, girlfriends, families who love them, went to college one day. And for some reason, as the judge points out, that we'll never fully understand, had their lives snuffed out at 4:12 in the morning by that thing sitting there at counsel's table wearing orange, Brian Kohberger. He didn't speak at all except for the one line when the court said, "Mr. Kohberger, do you wish to make a statement?" And like the good little schoolboy, he said, "I respectfully decline," still looking for some sort of pat on the top of the head, still acting like the PhD student who could get an A for his classroom behavior and trying to fool us into thinking he's respectful in any way. Here's that moment.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
What's that about? Who does he think he's fooling? What a joke this man is. I use that term very loosely. The judge sentencing him as expected to the maximum on all counts, 10 years in prison on the burglary count, life without, well, he didn't say without parole. We'll talk to Matt about that in a minute, but life for Maddie, life for Kaylee, life for Xana, life for Ethan to run consecutively, meaning one after the other, along with $50,000 in fines for each victim and a $5,000 civil penalty to the family. This is the end, technically, guys. My panel's back with me, Phil Holloway, Howard Blum, and Matt Murphy. This is the end. I don't know. It feels unsatisfying. Matt, you've been through this so many times. Does it always feel unsatisfying?
Well, it's always a little anticlimactic when there's a plea, Megyn. I think that if this was a sentencing after a jury trial, we might feel a little bit different because we would have really seen the exhaustion of all the evidence that was available. We would have seen and heard every detail of this investigation. And I've said it before, but kudos to the police here. They really are the heroes on this, from the local police department to the state troopers of Idaho, to the FBI. They really did an outstanding job. And I hope people remember that. The only reason why we had this sentencing is because of the hard work of those men and women. And I was really grateful to see the family members acknowledge them in that. Even Mr. Gonzalez, as angry as he was, he gave a shout out to the police, which I thought was really dignified. But I'm struck by this judge. It's important for people to remember that all judges are not created equal. And this Judge Hippler did a fantastic job. I thought that his comments were exactly on point. And I think that he really spoke to all of us when he said, the more we wonder why in something that he would never tell the truth on and is really unexplainable anyway, the more we continue to give him power. Now, everybody wants to know why because we want to prevent it. We want to see it coming. We want to know what to look for to prevent the next Brian Kohberger. But I thought that he was outstanding. And remember, he did not have to impose that. This was discretionary with the court. That was one of my criticisms of Thompson at the beginning. He surrendered that power to sentence to the, they call it fixed life in Idaho, which is life without possibility of parole.
Okay,
the court imposed that
life
upon its own discretion. So hats off to the court. I thought that judge really did an outstanding job today, and he did exactly the right thing. And I thought his comments are something that we should all think about.
It was a new perspective setter because we're also unsatisfied with him not having to explain why. But it was a good reminder of like, who cares? Who cares? What could he possibly say that would satisfy any of us? This cretin, this human excrement sitting there. I don't know what happened to him, but he doesn't seem human to me. He seems otherworldly, and I don't mean that in a complimentary way. He just seems like something, frankly, that needs to be snuffed out. But the next best thing, Howard, is to have him rot in prison for the rest of his life. And I'm picturing the door closing behind him, as the judge said.
I'm from the set that finds this deeply unsatisfying. There are two diametrically opposed positions presented today. One was by the Gonsalves family that raised questions, specific questions. They wanted answers. The judge, in effect, said, let's move on. He said that literally. Let's move on. We can forget about it. Well, I think it's too soon to forget about it. Yes, we'll never know a rational reason why he did it, but there still are other questions remaining. Where is the knife? How did he cover up his tracks? I would like more answers. I think the people of Idaho, the families, and all of us, the public, should have been presented with more answers.
You know, I did think it was a little odd, Phil, that the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, spent a good chunk of his closing remarks trying to talk about how he notified the families of the pending plea. It was like he was trying to rehabilitate himself in response to Steve Gonsalves's complaints about the way the plea was handled. I just thought that was totally inappropriate. It reminded me of the judge when Kohberger, pleaded guilty, making it all about the phone calls he'd received from people who are out. Like, stop making it about yourself. This isn't about you rehabbing you.
I've been pretty critical about this prosecution team, not for the quality of the case they put together, because as others have correctly mentioned, they did a great job along with the law enforcement who investigated this case. But from a PR perspective, I think that they really dropped the ball. And to see an extension of that today, it was almost like you saw a little bit of grandstanding. This is there's no jury present. It's just a judge. This is a non-jury proceeding. So it was a bit over the top in terms of theatrics. And as you mentioned, it seemed to be aimed at rehabilitating their own image for those of us in the public who are being somewhat critical. They, in my view, should have had all of the families in agreement on this plea deal, or there would be no deal. That's just my opinion. That's how I would have played it if I had been the prosecutor, because that would have perhaps left us with perhaps some little bit more increased measure of satisfaction. We're all left unsatisfied right now. Think about how the families must feel as they're leaving the courthouse. But had there been a trial and a sentencing hearing with evidence and aggravation, we might have known a lot more, because as we go forward today, we're all left with these lingering questions of why. Why did this have to happen? Why did it happen? And because I think the decisions the prosecutor made, we're going to be left with these answers. And let me just point this one thing out. This court today rendered a judgment. There can be a judgment in any case. But when we speak of what justice is, was justice delivered? Justice is one of those words that's incapable of being defined, and it's in the eye of the beholder. But I would submit that there is no amount of justice, whatever it may be, that can possibly apply to this case, because the magnitude of the destruction, not only of the individuals' lives who were taken, but the destruction that is left in the wake of this evil, evil, evil act, is not capable of receiving adequate justice, in my view. So there's, I think, always going to be some measure of dissatisfaction, because justice just can't address this kind of evil.
That's so well said. It captures what I'm feeling right now. When I listened to, for example, Kaylee's sister speak, I felt like, yes, this is what I want. I want to hear him humiliated. I'm enjoying that piece. But everything else has just left me with this empty feeling of like, why? Not demanding an explanation, but just the human evil, the evil that walks amongst us as human beings, and the snuffing out of these 4 lives with nothing but promise in front of them. And Steve Gonsalves was right. They did a very good job, those families, of getting out the videos of those 4 kids and helping us get to know them, Howard, and fall in love with the 4 of them and their huge 1,000-watt smiles and the joy they clearly felt on the Idaho campus, and the football games they celebrated, and the dance parties. The one sister mentioned, these were jubilant, really happy, lovely kids, just American kids trying to get an education and have a good time. And he resented it without him saying anything. We know, you've written about it. He couldn't stand their happiness.
I mean, Steve, to my mind, is a hero throughout this whole thing. He refused to just move on. Everyone else, the judge, the prosecutor, they kept on repeating that phrase, It's time to move on. It's time to move on. Well, the reality is none of these families are ever going to be able to move on. I don't think the town of Moscow will be able to move on. And I think we should have been given some answers. The sister Olivia raised the questions. The questions were, as you pointed out, very similar to the questions Kohberger included in his master's dissertation that he distributed at prisons. He should be asked those questions. We should get those answers.
That's the other thing. The judge is like, well, I really hope no journalist or, publishing house gives him the opportunity to give an interview or write a book. First of all, he's not allowed to make money on a book. That's illegal. But that's not to say, I guess, one couldn't be published and where he wouldn't get paid. And he's going to get the knock on the door from journalists up and down the spectrum. And Catherine Rumsfeld or whatever her last name, I'm forgetting her last name. Thank you, Ramsland. His former master's professor at DeSales University has said she'd like to study him. He'll love all of that. Look, that's just human nature. People want to study serial killers. It's a natural thing we want to understand. But I will say to this Judge Hippler, you know what would have made it slightly less likely is if your DA required him to really cop to the crime and explain himself at this sentencing hearing, Matt. Like him allowing this defendant to remain an enigma, to not say anything, is only going to make the press and everyone else more interested in him.
Yeah, I want to add on to that a little bit, Megyn. And I want to be fair here because it's a tough job. You're the elected DA. You got a lot going on. You have the families. There are good reasons. Look, when it comes to appellate issues, things like that, all of that is real, and it gives some finality. I hate the word closure. He used it. I think that's a trope. These families, like Howard pointed out, there's no closure for them. But so that said, I want to be fair to the prosecutor. However, that little speech that he gave, that performative aspect of that, first of all, the seminal case in the United States, happens to be out of Idaho. It's a Sonia Sotomayor 2019 opinion from the United States Supreme Court called Garza versus Idaho. Thompson made this big point of saying he waived his appellate rights. The case in the United States is out of Idaho that says you can't actually ever waive your appellate rights. So that's not real. And it is the law that he can still, as the court pointed out at the end, you got 42 days to file your notice of appeal. It might breach the plea because that essentially is a contract, but now it's post-sentencing. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see him file notice of appeal, and you can do that. And that's for direct appeal. We still have the entire habeas process, which is another way to challenge a conviction. And Thompson gave that up with his plea. He did. He knows he did. And look, there's good reasons for, good reasons against. I'm with Philip here. I wouldn't have given him this deal. Death penalty cases are hard. That goes with the job. Dealing with family members who disagree, also that's a part of the job. But another thing that really does disturb me a little bit on this is there's a saying, Megyn, so goes California, goes the rest of the nation. We've all heard that before. There are huge movements and legislative pushes in the state of California to eliminate LWOP, or life without possibility of parole, as a sentence. 40 years is a long time. And the last time we talked about this, I said, I think he's going to get a parole hearing one day.
Since President Trump was sworn in, his administration has made enormous progress at a breakneck pace. But don't forget, while they're moving mountains for the good of the nation, you've got your own personal savings to worry about. And one of the best ways to look after your savings is through diversification, particularly with gold, like from Birch Gold Group. In the past 12 months, the value of gold has increased by 40%. OMG. Central banks continue to bolster demand for gold by buying in record quantities. Global instability and tension is high, and Birch Gold makes owning physical gold extremely easy. Easily convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or buy some to store in your home safe. Just text MK to the number 989898, and Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, take control of your savings today. Text MK to the number 989898. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.